Welcome to today's video on the worst day of the week, being Monday. What we have to talk about today is going to be superstition. It's going to be fortune telling, card reading, mysteries and prophecies. Because the main talk of the day is leaks, is predictions, is future being revealed in visions and lucid dreams. What I am talking about is that recently we have gotten quite an interesting wave of leaks, right? We have gotten the leaks about the 10.0 expansion, what it's going to be about. Even recently, we have gotten the leaked post from Blizzard that was going to announce both the cross-faction play and the banning of the boosting communities. Most people just thought this was going to be fake purely because of how wild it sounded right before the announcements actually came out. But what I found more interesting, what I found more important to talk about, just to see what is your idea about this, if you actually believe in superstition, is these series of predictions being brought forward, being heralded by a user on a WoW forum hailing all the way from China. And this started all the way back in 2017. Because what is interesting about this user and about its prediction is that a couple of months, roughly a couple of months before we had the official announcement of Battle for Azeroth, he was able to predict that the next expansion was going to be BFA. And it's like, okay, fine. It's a couple of months early. Maybe he legitimately had maybe some employee, perhaps some ex-employee, maybe a journalist who got to know about it and he was able to get that information. It's possible, right? After all, he didn't really specify anything further. It's not that he knew any of the systems or the story, etc., etc. So it's certainly possible that a handful of people knew about the name of the expansion a few months before the actual announcement, right? It's not too big of a leak. Now, where things start getting quite a bit spookier and quite a bit more into the supernatural is the fact that he also started predicting the expansions following BFA. Because in his prophecy, he was pointing out that the thought process, roughly the thought process of Blizzard, was to split the expansions into some main themes. He had the example of the Burning Crusade lore, which was about the Warlords of Draenor and the Legion expansion. Warlords, of course, was about the orcs of old being sort of corrupted, overtaken by the Burning Legion once again, and then of course you had Legion itself being entirely about the Burning Legion. He also pointed out that the following expansions would have been about Wrath of the Lich King. They would have followed the Old Gods line that we also had in Wrath of the Lich King, and we had BFA follow that up with N'Zoth being the last boss of the expansion. The further prediction, the further leak, sort of, was the Wrath of the Lich King storyline that would be followed in 9.0, so in the next expansion. Bear in mind, this was years before we even knew anything about Shadowlands. His prediction in itself was that the expansion in question, 9.0, would have been about the Shadowlands. He didn't actually name the expansion Shadowlands, the name itself of the expansion, but rather the location where the expansion would have taken place would have been the Shadowlands, and that it would have been about a new Lich King, or the real Lich King, which fits pretty nicely what has been going on with the Jailer in Shadowlands. And of course the location was also perfectly predicted, and this was years before we knew anything about it. This was basically before you even knew about BFA. So up to this point, this Nostradamus is 2 for 2. 2 expansions out of 2 have been guessed correctly, and now he's out for more. He's going forward. He's not stopping at 8.0, at 9.0. He wants 10, 11, 12, even 13. He is planning out the entire schedule of WoW until we are all grandpas. And what is also interesting is that the 10.0 prediction of this user, Solicct, is that it's going to be about dragons. Yes, this is also the type of leak that we have been seeing or hearing or reading somewhere else about how the 10.0 expansion was about to be a more natural and old Azeroth. It would have been more about elves, about gods like Elune, and as well about the dragons, the Dragon Isles, etc, etc. We even had snippets, certain leaks that I reported on a few weeks ago about elemental lords and the elemental plane within Azeroth also being possibly part of the future expansion. And what is interesting is that in this prophecy from Chinese Nostradamus is that the 10.0 expansion would be about the dragon storyline, the dragon theme, and 11.0 would be about the elemental lords. And he goes back to make mention of the themes of the expansions. After the Burning Crusade theme of Warlords and Legion, the Wrath of the Lich King theme of BFA and Shadowlands, he pointed out the Cataclysm theme of 10.0 and 11.0. The Cataclysm theme being, of course, the Elemental Lords that we have seen multiple times across the Cataclysm expansion within Alakir and Ragnaros, and of course the Deepholm zone with Therazane, and Neptulon was there as well. And then of course the part of the Cataclysm storyline about dragons, about the dragon aspects giving up their power after they made the Dragon Soul to try to defeat Deathwing with it. Dragons were also a big part of Cataclysm. So according to this method of Chinese card telling, the next couple of expansions will go and follow the Cataclysm storyline, first with the dragon storyline and some more dragons into the mix, and then followed up by elementals once again. He then goes even further beyond. Perhaps explaining the expansions for his kids, talking about 12 and 13.0, about yet another string of the storyline after the TBC part, the Wrath part, the Cataclysm part. We go forward to closing out the Mists storyline in the Orden faction war line of 12.0, and then the Shah storyline of 13.0. I thought this was all quite interesting. We don't talk about really that often about leaks and predictions on this channel. We have only once, spent a couple of videos about the possible leaks related to the next expansion, especially after we got the news of 9.2, what 9.2 was going to be about, and the fact that it was likely going to be the last big patch of the expansion. So we were heading towards 10.0. We talked about a couple of the possible leaks towards 10.0, but that was it. I don't usually pay too much attention to leaks, predictions, speculations and whatnot, but this one caught my attention primarily, number one, because of how correct it has been so far, over even years in the past, even years before everyone was the wiser and had any idea about, particularly about Shadowlands and what it would have been about. So given that this Chinese pen without his Chinese teller has been so right, up to this point it was worth giving some weight, giving some credence to these possible predictions and leaks and visions of the future, especially since we are getting more and more credibility, perhaps viability of the next expansion being about dragons. This list of predictions start gaining even more credibility. I wonder what would be your reaction, a normal player's reaction, in being told that one single man has been able to predict the next 3 expansions in a row. Okay, fine, if you predict BFA a couple of months before it's released, I can kind of believe it, I can kind of see it was a leak, someone told you before, it's fine, okay. That's perfectly possible. But then 2 expansions in a row, and then 3 expansions in a row. Something's wrong here. I mean, something's got to give here. This guy might actually know something and not just be lucky or have gotten a random tip from someone else. Now, as for me personally, as usual, it's always worth reminding, I don't really care too much about the settings of the expansions or what they're going to be about. My most pressing matter whenever there is a new expansion announced are going to be the endgame systems, the activities available to the player. I think WoW is rich enough in its story and in its previous and past lore to be able to make a decent setting pretty much from any type of branch of the story. I'm pretty sure you could make a banger expansion even if it was about Murlocs trying to take over Azeroth and teaming up with gnolls and invading the Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, and you had to fight them off. I still think it would be a great great expansion as long as the game systems would be working just fine. So I'm not really too affected by what exactly is going to be talked about within an expansion. I might have my preferences. For example, I wasn't too big of a fan about the Worlds of Draenor expansion, and going back to orcs once again, I started kind of getting a little bit of fell green sickness once we got into Legion, after seeing this fell green demon style enemies for a little bit too long, to be honest. And I would be pretty happy with a dragon themed expansion. I think dragons are cool. We have gotten multiple different races and kinds of dragons up to this point after all the years, after we saw our first usable, interactable dragon all the way back to Burning Crusade with the Netherwing Drakes. So I think delving a little bit deeper into dragons would be kind of cool. Finally, also, it would be kind of a different type of setting than just humans and humanoid characters and enemies and protagonists that we have gotten for these past expansions. You know, Shadowlands was basically mostly humanoids and human characters and human enemies. BFA was also mostly just humanoids. Yes, Ajara kind of had a few too many tentacles, but still, the only one who really wasn't was Azeroth. Worlds of Draenor, we are back to mostly just humans. Even Legion, it was also lots of humans as well. So a dragon-themed expansion, maybe we move away a little bit more from humanoids, we go back to having some monsters, some creatures, some dragons. I think it would be cool. And honestly, the same goes for 11.0. I think it's been a while, it's been a while since we have gotten elementals be part of the story. We have moved away from that. We went into the Burning Legion and into the Old Gods, and we kind of left the elemental plane and the 4 different elemental lords behind. As pointed out by the thought process of Blizzard, by this Chinese future reader, the Cataclysm lore, the Cataclysm storylines have basically been ended in Cataclysm itself. Ever since then, we moved on to different things. Ragnaros, Therazane, Neptulon have kind of been on hibernation since then, really. We got some callbacks in Legion with artifact weapons for sure, but not really much to talk about, so I also would be kind of happy to have elementals be part of the main story once again, if that were to come through in 11.0 or even earlier, even in 10.0, it would be still kind of cool. Still, it wouldn't be my main concern about the quality of the expansion, but it is certainly looking at the very least a change of pace from the typical setting we have gotten in the past few expansions. So I thought this type of prediction, this type of prophecy set forth from the Chinese side of the world was interesting enough to go over, because I think the amount of correct predictions one after the other start getting kind of spooky. So I wondered what you guys, what all of you who might not have read about this or heard about this yet think about this straight line of correct predictions being put forth. Do you think this guy is legitimately boiling and then consuming hallucinogenic mushrooms and literally just going on his delirious visions? Perhaps does he have a partner, a buddy that is working within Blizzard, giving him leak after leak? Perhaps he's a hacker, perhaps he's an assassin who stole this data from Blizzard, or maybe it was just down to luck. Maybe BFA a couple of months before the announcement was a tip, and then Shadowlands was just a completely random guess, and for now he has just been very lucky. So I will leave you with these possible options as the nature of these predictions. Let me guys know, of course, also what you think about these possible predictions, if you would be fine and happy about a dragon expansion, even more so an elemental expansion in 11.0, and also, of course, whether or not, like me, you actually care about the setting of the expansion, or you are more worried about more important things within the game. For now, however, I'm going to leave you to the rest of your Monday, hoping it ends soon. Thank you, of course, for watching the video and for helping and contributing to the channel. You can, of course, contribute even more by liking on the video as well as commenting down below, and also, of course, by subscribing to the channel. But this time around, this is a believer safe space, so only people who totally believe on these set of predictions are going to be allowed to subscribe to the channel. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, the only thing I'm kind of sad about is that to know if this guy was completely correct, we will have to wait 8 years. Am I even gonna be alive in 8 years?